Hi everybody, I thought I would join you for your last section of attachment. And this one focuses on the influence of early attachment type on later relationships. And what is meant by later relationships? It means later childhood, romantic adult relationships, and parenting. And there's also a common theme that threads through all of them, and that is the interning working model. Now, quick question, and you can say it to the screen. Who was the psychologist that developed the interning working model? Yeah, that's right. It was Bowlby. Now, according to Bowlby, the interning working model is of utmost importance. It means that this mental schema that is developed from our monotropic individual will be the blueprint for all future relationships. Now, what he means by that is how the parent interacts with the infant. It creates this template, this blueprint, this foundation, whatever you want to call it, for all future relationships. We can see that in Ainsworth's types of attachment. Securely attached infants have a parent who's very sensitive to their needs, and therefore they will display those type of behaviors. Also insecure resistant, we can see that ambivalent type of behavior, that inconsistency behavior that they have because they don't know how the mother's going to respond, and they will respond that way to the mother. Insecure avoidant, again, we can see that parent, the monotropic individual, avoids this emotional engagement for the majority of the time, and therefore that child will display the same thing. So according to Bowlby, this interning working model is the foundation for all our future relationships. Now, he also calls it a mental schema, a mental framework for future relationships. Now, what does this mean? Let's keep it simple to start with. So, for example, you've got a good experience of attachment. Bowlby would say they would have good relationships expectations. So if that child had a sensitive mother for a securely attached child, then they will learn the relevant behaviours of being caring, loving, supportive, trusting, and therefore they will be able to pass them on to their ability to form relationships in later life. For example, if you look at my little diagram underneath, right at the top we have a little baby interacting with the parent. Here we've got a good mother who's interactive, very sensitive. Here the child will learn and create its interning working model. So that will enable them as they grow up to actually develop meaningful friendships, to be able to engage, be supportive, be caring, being understanding, and they'll expect that same type of behavior in return. Again, it will be passed on to their ability to create romantic relationships, being able to express emotions on an intimate level, and therefore developing meaningful romances, which may in turn lead to one day a person becoming a parent. And that parent, because they have their interning working model, they will react that way to their own child, and in turn will create that interning working model in their child, and actually it becomes quite a perpetual cycle. So let's keep it basic for now. So we've looked at what makes a good experience, so therefore secure attached. What if a child experiences bad experiences of attachment? So they have some form of insecure type of attachment, insecure resistant, insecure avoidant. Technically, they will have bad relationships expectations. Please note, this doesn't say that they can't make friendships. It's how the friendships are carried out. It's the experiences they have and how they interact with each other. So, for example, itchy nose. If the mother is insecure avoidant, so very little emotional engagement, we can see that when they grow older, they'll feel that they don't have to emotionally engage in their friendships. And we know friendships, we give each other emotional support is in a good friendship, whereas they might not be able to do this, or insecure resistant. They might be insecure in the fact that sometimes they are very supportive and sometimes they're not, or very jealous. They'll have these mixed emotions with them. So really, on a basic level, good experience as an infant, means in later relationships we'll have good relationships because we know how to relate to that other person. Bad experiences or inconsistencies in our attachment that we make as an infant will show inconsistencies in our ability to form meaningful relationships in later childhood and also adults. Yes. Woo! Peel. We can't forget about good old peel. Yeah, we've got to keep up this peeling. Don't worry, I'm doing this one and I'm going to talk you through it, but you'll need to be doing a few on your own to keep it up practicing. So let's start with our key point. There is supportive evidence for the continuity of a person's attachment type in later relationships. I thought this one would be appropriate for the AO1 that we've just covered. Remember, you want your AO3 to be appropriate for the AO1 that you've just covered. So we've got a nice clear point. Right, our first E, explain. Explain what the point means. So you want to be clear with that. So according to the internal working model, the type of attachment a child develops within the critical period predicts the type of relationships they will have throughout their life. So it clearly explains the idea of continuity. Remember, explain what the point means. Now we need some evidence. Myron Wilson and Smith found that children who have insecure avoidant attachment is likely to be a victim of bullying, and insecure resistant attachment to be the bully. Evidence just means evidence. Now, first of all, before we move on, that evidence has to support the point that you're making. So this evidence shows about continuity from the type of attachment they developed as an infant to later relationships in childhood. Now we need to elaborate, explain what the research means in relationship to the point. Attachment type clearly shows the quality of peer relationships in later childhood. So that's what that evidence is saying in relationship to a point. It clearly shows there is the idea of continuity. Now, our final E is evaluate. Now, evaluate, remember, can mean in further support or to challenge. So it's really important that we link one of these in. Here, we've got some challenging evidence. However, not all studies support the idea of continuity of attachment type. Zimmerman found that there was very little between the quality of infant attachment and adolescent attachment. So this piece of research is actually challenging the idea of continuity. It's important that it links to that idea. So early attachment and adolescence types of attachment, they're seeing no link of continuity. Now, our final part is our linking sentence. Remember, the linking sentence is about doing a mini conclusion. What is this overall telling us? Overall, this does show that there is continuity between early attachment type and later relationships. A nice little concluding sentence. Yeah, don't worry. You need to be doing some a little bit later on. So, let's start looking, as we've got a brief understanding of the idea of continuity and the internal working model, let's look at it in the form of relationships in later childhood. So our first little point here, attachment type associated with the quality of peer relationships. There is a strong positive correlation. Now I'm saying correlation, we're not saying causation. We've just got to remember that. Good evaluation point, perhaps write it in the margin. Correlation, not causation. But we'll come back to that in a peel point. So there is an association, and this is what Bowlby is saying as well, between the quality of our attachment type as an infant in our peer relationships. So securely attached, it is believed that these individuals will tend to have high quality and meaningful relationships from later childhood all the way through. Whereas insecure attachment, so one of our insecure avoidant or insecure resistant types of attachment, will have friendship difficulties. Please note, it's not saying that they can't make friendships or have relationships. It's that they will find difficulties. There will be issues that they will have in connecting with other individuals in making friendships or romantic relationships. So research, now we're linking back to the research that we mentioned in our peel side, predicts the type of research. Research shown that actually in attachment, the type of attachment will influence later childhood behaviours. And we're going to focus on the idea of bullying. With regards to securely attached children, you will find that they will not be bullied and they will not be the bully because they can fit in. They're not seen as different. Their interaction is seen as the norm. They can make friendships. Whereas it's been found that if we have an insecure resistant, so this is somebody that wants to be liked, but they resist the reciprocal behavior that they'll get for others, actually, they're more likely to be a bully. Whereas insecure avoidant, because they try to avoid the interaction between others, so therefore may be seen as a loner, are more likely to be the bully. Now, make sure you refer to this in your notes. Give a nice little Susan, because it was a questionnaire they did also in the margin, right? You know, elements of the AO3 could be there. If it was a questionnaire they're filling in, we know we've got some issues around that. Research method, we've got strengths, limitations. Can you use some of them to apply? Pause here and perhaps write that up. And when you're ready, just continue. Right, let's start talking about adulthood and romantic relationships. Now, this is an area, again, it is believed that our internal working model is the blueprint for all relationships, and that includes our romantic relationships. So the idea, it is how we know how to engage. Securely attached adults will be more sensitive to the other person's needs. They'll be more understanding, more engaging, and therefore develop strong, meaningful romantic relationships. Whereas insecure resistant type adults will have problems in maintaining this romantic relationship. You know, they will want to be loved by that person and they'll be so loving, but then they have the fear of being rejected and therefore they will push the person away. So again, we've got that ambivalent type of behavior coming through. Insecure avoidant types, actually, they will perhaps fear the idea of intimacy. They won't have relationships that last very long because they don't know how to emotionally commit. So here we can clearly see that the attachment type will influence the type of relationship that we'll have. Now, there is one piece of research that's quite important here, so perhaps you could set up a key study sheet for this one. And this one looks at, it's called the Love Quiz. If you look on your resources sections on your weekly workload, you will actually see a mini version of the Love Quiz. So perhaps carry it out so that you get to understand it a little bit better. But let's go through some of these sections first so that it makes more sense. Now, Hazen and Schaefer are the two names, key names that you need to know. So make sure that you highlight them in your notes. They wanted to see whether there was the continuity between child attachment, so our infant attachment type, and later romantic relationships. So they carried out the idea of doing some research to see whether they can identify and establish that there is this continuity between them. Now, what research method was used? Have a look in the textbook. I will pause for a moment, right, and then I'd like you to answer it. Right, so what research method was used? Well, it was a love quiz. It was in a newspaper or magazine, and people were answering questions. So yes, it's going to be a questionnaire. What sampling technique did they use? Now think about it. It's up to that person whether they fill out the love quiz and then they have to send it back. So there is really only one type. I'll give you a moment again. Pause. and let's write it up. That's right. The sampling technique they used would have been volunteer, and explain why they did this, because they needed people to respond to their quiz and send it in, just like I said before. So it was really the only type of a questionnaire that they could use getting people to volunteer. Now, what was the sample size? Come on, read it in the textbook, write it down. I'm sure you can answer that one. They divided the quiz into 3 sections. I'd like you to give me a description of each section. Now, what I'd like you to do is state the findings in terms of the attachment type. So I want you to give me one for securely attached and also the insecure type of attachments. You can write that up. Remember to pause. So what conclusion did they make? Give you a moment, rewrite your conclusion, and then see if you got the same as I've got. Right, the conclusion that they made was that there was definitely a continuity between the type of attachment they had experienced in infancy compared to the type of romantic relationships that they develop in adulthood. So continuity, or we could even link to Bowlby's continuity hypothesis, clearly states that our attachment type as an infant will influence all future romantic relationships in adulthood. Now, go and actually do the quiz, try it out, see where you fall, but please remember, this is just a mini version. It's not the complete version. It has questions from the 3 different sections, but not enough of them to make that judgment. Can anyone tell me why I haven't given you the full love quiz? Ethical reasons, yes. You know, perhaps you find something out that you thought was quite the difference, so it could cause you psychological harm. Yeah, so it's only a mini version, so please do not think it's going to clearly predict how, but give it a go. It's a bit of fun. Right, our third section that we're looking at is parenting and attachment type. Just like we said earlier, we develop an internal working model in infancy, and that internal working model influences us in later childhood, in our romantic relationships. So therefore, it's also going to influence how we're going to interact with our own children. So a parenting style is based on our own internal working model. Just like that diagram I showed you at the start. When we become parents, we rely on that understanding of what it is to be a parent, because remember, it was our parent that developed our internal working model. We are going to pass that on to our children. Now, according to Bailey et al.'s research, they did a bit of research and they assessed 99 mothers and their attachments to their 1-year-old babies, and they compared that to their own attachment that they had with their mothers. And they used both questionnaires and interviews to gather the data. Now, they would have asked the mothers questions about what their childhood was like in infancy and how they interacted with their mothers. But please remember, here's a nice little AO3. This is requiring subjective retrospective recall. You know what it's like when we're trying to recall memories from our past? They might not also be accurate. So that can affect the overall validity of the findings. So a little bit of something to put in your margins as a wee reminder. And what they found was that mothers who reported to have poor relationships with their mother also seem to have poor relationships with their own infants. So really, this research connects to the idea of continuity. So it does support the idea that our internal working model, just like Bowlby had identified, becomes our parenting style. So if we had an insecure avoidant attachment type, we are more likely to be insecure avoidant in how we approach our own infant children. So we've got that continuity between them. Lovely AO3. Didn't animate this one. But let's work through it together. The interning working model is a very deterministic explanation of the future in our relationships. Now, what we mean by deterministic, you should all know what deterministic. Let's just look at the word first of all. If we're looking at a deterministic view or determinism, that means that there is a specific cause. So there is one thing that causes our behavior, nothing else. So really, when you look at the interning working model in itself, it's actually very deterministic because it says it is the only cause for our attachment and behavior that we have in all future relationships. So let's look at this again. We've got our point clearly stated. Now we need to explain the point. As it states that the type of attachment a person develops during childhood is the cause for all future relationships. So we've got to be able to explain this. Now again, we need some evidence. Clark and Clark, yes, they were husband and wife team, but we don't need to write that down, states that this is problematic and people are not doomed to have bad relationships if they have an insecure attachment type, only a higher risk. Now, being deterministic isn't always a good thing. Sometimes it is, but it is an issue. Because really, what they are saying is that we are doomed in our relationships if we can only interact and engage with people based on our attachment type. So they're actually challenging this idea, saying it is a very deterministic view, but we've got to include other factors. It can't be the determining factor. So let's elaborate, as there are many other factors that will influence how a person behaves within a relationship, e.g. the situation, commitments, the social constraint, your temperament, right? All of these actually play a fact, not just that one element. According to Bowlby, it is just the interning working model. And what Clark and Clark are saying is, no, we have complex lives and there are a lot of different factors that can influence how we form a relationship. Even as a securely attached person, we might actually have a relationship with one person that actually could be quite toxic because of all the other factors that influence, not your attachment type. So, we've explained it now. We want to bring in and evaluate. Bowlby neglects to acknowledge the notion of free will. So what we're doing is we're bringing in an idea to kind of further challenge this deterministic view. As a person may choose to behave differently in a relationship compared to their own upbringing. We have, to a certain degree, freedom of choice. We can choose to be nice or we can choose to be horrible. We know that we make those decisions. But according to this explanation, we don't have free will. You've got no choice. But actually, we do. There are times when you might actually think, I don't want to do that. And you can actually be quite spiteful. Meanwhile, you have a good, strong relationship because it's your choice. And that's what Clark and Clark are saying. So let's finish up with a little conclusion, thereby highlighting a very restricted explanation of behavior in later relationships. So maybe that's what we can say about Bowlby's interning working model and later relationships, that it is a restricted explanation. Now, the nice thing about this AO3 is that we're bringing in a debate. We have lots of different debates, free will versus determinism. So again, it's using this knowledge of, you know what determinism, but you have to apply it to the concepts that you're talking about. And that's where linking comes in as well. We don't just need a linking sentence. Our point needs to link to what the topic area is. Our explain needs to link to the point. Our evidence needs to link to illustrate our point. Our elaboration needs to link to explaining this evidence. Our evaluate needs to again link to either in further support or to challenge. So it has to link, and then our linking sentence finishes off with a little mini conclusion that ties it all together. Oh, I feel like I can breathe now. Phew. Got through all of that without tripping up too much. Right, what do you need to do? Right, I've already done 2 appeals for you, so I'd like you to do 2 more. Remember, you can email me both or one to let me check your appeals. Right, it's really important that we keep up that skill. Also, there's additional work that you can be doing. You could be moving on to the electronic textbook. There is some great apply it questions for you to do, and there you can check your answer. There's also additional questions, a quiz. There is quite a bit on there for you to get on and to really engage and to cement your learning. Remember, you've got an assessment due on the 3rd of the 4th, right? So it's really important. You can email it before then or on that date, but it's really important I do get that because I still need to be able to assess you. This is stuff that you need to know for next year's exams. So it's really important that you're being vigilant and keeping up with your work. Remember, if you have any questions at all, no matter how big or small or how silly you may think it is, please just email me. I'm an email away because I want to support you as much as I possibly can. Now, on that happy note, I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.